Gap 5S. Before Elizabeth I ascended to the throne, England was a nation in turmoil. The country had been rocked by religious upheaval, shifting violently between Protestantism and Catholicism under the reigns of Henry VIII, Edward VI, and Mary I. By the time Elizabeth took the crown in 1558, the nation was weary and divided. Elizabeth, the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, inherited a kingdom fraught with political instability and religious discord. Her legitimacy was questioned by many, especially by Catholics who viewed her as an illegitimate child born out of Henry's controversial marriage to Anne. The young queen faced immense challenges. She had to navigate a treacherous political landscape, balancing the interests of powerful nobles, religious factions, and foreign powers. Her court was a hotbed of intrigue, with spies and informers lurking in every corner. The threat of assassination was ever present. Despite these challenges, Elizabeth proved to be a shrewd and capable ruler. She established the Elizabethan religious settlement, which sought to unite her people under a moderate form of Protestantism, and she skillfully managed her court and her councillors, ensuring her grip on power remained firm. Under her rule, England began to flourish. The arts and sciences thrived, exploration expanded the horizons of the known world, and the nation stood resilient against external threats. Elizabeth's reign marked the beginning of what would come to be known as the Elizabethan Age, a period of relative stability and prosperity. Yet beneath the surface, the realm was still a powder keg of religious and political tensions, ready to explode at any moment. It was in this precarious climate that the story of treachery and intrigue unfolds, revealing the true extent of the dangers that Elizabeth faced. This is going to blow your mind. Elizabeth I was Queen of England. The Protestant Queen sat upon the throne. Her Catholic cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, was a threat. Many wished to see Mary on the throne. England was dangerous, plots and conspiracies were rife. The Queen was vulnerable, her enemies were many. Catholics and Protestants clashed. The threat of invasion loomed. Gap 5S. In the shadowed halls of power, secrets seldom remained hidden for long. Elizabeth's court was a hotbed of espionage. The Queen's spy master, Sir Francis Walsingham, was ever watchful. His network of informants was vast. No whisper went unheard, no letter went unread. Gap 3S. It was through Walsingham's cunning that the plot against Elizabeth was discovered. A coded message intercepted, a traitor revealed. The consequences were dire. Trust was shattered. Nobles were arrested. Torture chambers echoed with confessions. Gap 3S. Elizabeth's enemies learned a harsh lesson. The Virgin Queen was always one step ahead, but the discovery of the plot left scars. The court was more divided than ever. Suspicion and fear reigned. In the Game of Thrones, there were no winners, only survivors. Elizabeth knew the dangers. She was a shrewd and intelligent woman. She had survived many threats. Assassination attempts were common, rebellions were crushed, but danger remained. Her enemies were relentless. Elizabeth was a prisoner in her own palace. She could trust no one. The Tudor dynasty was at stake. England's future hung in the balance. The air was thick with suspicion. Plots against the Queen were common, some were fantasies, others meticulously planned. Mary, Queen of Scots, was a focal point. Catholics rallied to her cause. She became a figurehead for rebellion. Fanatics plotted her assassination. No one was above suspicion. Elizabeth relied on her spies. They were her eyes and ears. The most famous spy master was Sir Francis Walsingham. He was a master of intrigue. His web of informants stretched across Europe. He worked tirelessly to protect the Queen. He was the Queen's trusted advisor. Mary, Queen of Scots, was a thorn in Elizabeth's side. She had a strong claim to the English throne. Many Catholics believed Elizabeth was illegitimate. They saw Mary as the rightful queen. They plotted to put her on the throne. Mary had powerful allies. Elizabeth had to be careful. Mary was a prisoner in England. Mary had been forced to flee Scotland. Her people had turned against her. She was implicated in her husband's murder. Elizabeth reluctantly gave her cousin sanctuary. She placed Mary under house arrest. Mary was a magnet for intrigue. Elizabeth's advisors urged her to get rid of Mary. One of the most dangerous plots was the Northern Rebellion. Catholic nobles in the north rose up against Elizabeth. They wanted to put Mary on the throne. The rebellion was a serious threat. The rebels marched south. Elizabeth sent her army north to crush the rebellion. The Earl of Sussex led the royal forces. The Duke of Norfolk was the most powerful nobleman in England. He saw an opportunity to advance his ambitions. He entered into secret correspondence with Mary, proposing marriage. Elizabeth had her own network of spies. She had him arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. The Duke of Norfolk's imprisonment did not deter Elizabeth's enemies. A new plot was soon hatched. This time it involved a Florentine banker named Roberto Ridolfi. Ridolfi was a fervent Catholic. He believed Elizabeth must be removed from the throne. He sought support for his plan. He obtained a secret message from Mary, Queen of Scots. The plan was audacious. It involved a Spanish invasion of England. The Duke of Alva would land an army on the south coast. Catholic rebels would rise up across the country. Ridolfi believed his plan was foolproof. Sir Francis Walsingham was one step ahead. Walsingham had infiltrated Ridolfi's circle. The net was closing in. Walsingham's agents were everywhere. They intercepted a letter from Mary, Queen of Scots, to the Duke of Alva. It was written in code, but Walsingham's experts deciphered it. The letter proved Mary's complicity. He presented it to Elizabeth. Elizabeth resisted calls to execute Mary, but the Ridolfi plot changed everything. Years passed. Mary, Queen of Scots, remained a prisoner, but the threat to Elizabeth's throne was real. In 1586, a new plot was uncovered. It became known as the Babington Plot, named after Anthony Babington. Babington and his fellow conspirators were ardent Catholics. They believed it was their duty to remove Elizabeth. The plan involved assassinating Elizabeth and freeing Mary. They underestimated Sir Francis Walsingham. The trap was set. The Babington Plot was a complex web of intrigue. It involved secret messages, coded letters, and clandestine meetings. The conspirators were young and fanatical. They believed their correspondence was secure. They were wrong. Sir Francis Walsingham anticipated their every move. He broke the conspirators' cipher. With the cipher broken, Walsingham could read every word passing between Mary and the Babington conspirators. He needed more evidence to implicate Mary directly. This is where the double agent came in. His name was Gilbert Giffard. Giffard gained the trust of the conspirators. They used him to smuggle messages to Mary. Every message that passed through Giffard's hands was copied for Walsingham. With irrefutable evidence in hand, Elizabeth could no longer ignore the threat posed by her cousin. Mary, Queen of Scots, was put on trial for treason. She was accused of plotting the assassination of Queen Elizabeth. The trial was a show trial. Mary was found guilty and sentenced to death. Elizabeth faced a terrible dilemma. She signed the death warrant. On 8 February 1587, Mary, Queen of Scots, was beheaded at Fotheringhay Castle. She met her death with courage and dignity. Elizabeth was devastated. She had not wanted to execute Mary, but Mary's treachery left her no choice. The execution was a turning point in Elizabeth's reign. It marked the end of a long and bitter rivalry. Sir Francis Walsingham, the Queen's principal secretary, was a master of espionage. He created a network of informants that stretched across England and beyond. His spies were everywhere, listening for any whisper of dissent. Walsingham was a shadowy figure operating in darkness. His agents infiltrated the Babington plot. He knew the identities of the plotters. He even knew the contents of their secret correspondence with Mary, Queen of Scots. With meticulous care, Walsingham allowed the Babington plot to unfold, gathering irrefutable evidence. He waited for the opportune moment to strike. He needed to ensure that the plotters, especially Mary, Queen of Scots, were undeniably implicated. The moment came when the Babington conspirators arranged for a portrait. This act of vanity would be their downfall. Walsingham's agents seized the painting. The Queen, upon seeing the faces of the plotters, was horrified and enraged. With the evidence in hand, Walsingham moved swiftly and decisively. The Babington conspirators were arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. They were brutally interrogated. The full horror of their plot was laid bare before the court. The trial was a foregone conclusion. The conspirators were found guilty of high treason. Their executions were carried out with the full force of the law. News of the Babington plot sent shockwaves through England. The people were outraged that their queen's life had been threatened. Anti-Catholic sentiment reached fever pitch. Many believed Mary, Queen of Scots, was responsible for the conspiracy. Calls for her execution grew louder by the day. Elizabeth hesitated to order Mary's execution. Mary was a queen, a royal cousin, and her death would have repercussions throughout Europe. The evidence against Mary left Elizabeth with a heart-wrenching decision. The Babington plot cast a long shadow over England. Fear and suspicion stalked the land. The Queen, though shaken, remained resolute. She knew decisive action was needed. The conspirators had been dealt with. But the question of Mary, Queen of Scots, still hung heavy. Mary's fate was now in Elizabeth's hands. Elizabeth could not allow sentiment to cloud her judgment. The Queen's advisers were divided. Some, like Sir Francis Walsingham, urged swift justice. Mary's execution, they argued, was the only way to ensure safety. Others pleaded for clemency. Elizabeth listened to their counsel. She weighed the arguments carefully. The decision would have far-reaching consequences. Days turned into sleepless nights. Elizabeth hesitated. The weight of the crown pressed heavily on her. Finally, she made a decision. With a heavy heart, she signed Mary's death warrant. The warrant was dispatched to Fotheringhay Castle. The news spread like wildfire. England held its breath. Elizabeth knew that Mary's execution would brand her a tyrant, but she was prepared to bear that burden. The security of England outweighed all other considerations. She would not be swayed by foreign pressure or threats. The execution date was set for February 8, 1587. As the day approached, tension in court was palpable. Elizabeth withdrew from public view. She prayed for guidance, strength, and forgiveness. On a bleak February morning, Mary, Queen of Scots, was led to the scaffold in Fotheringhay Castle. She was dressed in black, her face pale but composed. She had spent the night in prayer. She mounted the steps with dignity, bidding farewell to her attendants with comfort and forgiveness. She declared her innocence but accepted her fate with stoicism that moved even her jailers. The executioner, masked and dressed in black, knelt before her. Mary, with a gentle smile, granted it. She blindfolded herself, knelt before the block, and prayed. A hush fell over the witnesses. The executioner raised his axe. The blade flashed in the dim light. There was a sickening thud. Mary, Queen of Scots, was no more. A collective gasp escaped the lips of those present. News of Mary's execution reached Elizabeth at Greenwich Palace. The Queen was overcome with grief and remorse. She had not wanted this, but she felt compelled to act, to protect her throne. England mourned the death of a queen. Even those who supported Mary's execution felt unease. The deed had stained Elizabeth's reign with the blood of kinship. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, had profound consequences. It enraged Catholic Europe. King Philip II of Spain, Mary's former brother-in-law, vowed revenge. He began preparations for a massive invasion of England. The Spanish Armada was about to set sail. England faced its greatest challenge yet. The stakes had never been higher. The fate of the nation rested on Elizabeth's shoulders. The Virgin Queen, once hesitant, would now need to summon all her courage to face the storm. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, sent shockwaves through England and Europe. The deed had stained Elizabeth's reign with the blood of kinship. The Queen chose her throne over family. It was a decision that haunted her. The Spanish ambassador was recalled. Protestant Europe watched, wondering if Elizabeth had overplayed her hand. Whispers started of tyranny, cold-hearted ambition. The Virgin Queen, once beloved, was now a figure of fear and controversy. Yet Elizabeth stood firm. She made her choice, unswayed by foreign pressure or public opinion. The security of England and her people was her paramount concern. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, showed her unwavering resolve. The consequences were immediate and far-reaching. Catholic Europe, outraged, turned against England. King Philip II of Spain vowed revenge. The Spanish Armada, a formidable fleet, was being prepared to sail. The threat of invasion loomed large over England. The nation rallied around their queen, their fears overshadowed by a surge of patriotic fervour. Elizabeth, her voice ringing with defiance, addressed her troops at Tilbury. "I know I have the body but of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." The clash of titans was inevitable. The Spanish Armada met the English fleet in the English Channel. The battle raged for days. A maelstrom of cannon fire, smoke and blood. Against all odds, the English emerged victorious, their smaller, more maneuverable ships proving more than a match for the lumbering Spanish galleons. The defeat of the Spanish Armada was a turning point in English history. It marked the beginning of England's rise to naval dominance. It solidified Elizabeth's hold on the throne and her place in the hearts of her people. The Virgin Queen, once vilified, was now hailed as a hero, a symbol of English strength and resilience. The plots and conspiracies that plagued Elizabeth's early reign faded into memory. The Queen, now secure on her throne, presided over a period of peace and prosperity. England, no longer under the shadow of invasion, flourished. The arts and sciences thrived. Exploration and discovery became the watchwords of the age. The Elizabethan era had begun. Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, never married. She took England as her husband, her people as her children. She ruled with wisdom and courage for 44 years, her reign becoming a golden age in English history. She was a shrewd politician, a skilled diplomat, and a patron of the arts. She was also a woman of great intellect, wit, and determination. The seeds of empire were sown during her reign. English explorers ventured to the New World, establishing colonies and claiming vast territories. English ships sailed the high seas, challenging Spain and Portugal. England, once a small island nation, was emerging as a global power. The Elizabethan era faced many challenges and controversies. Religious tensions simmered beneath the surface. Social and economic inequalities persisted. Yet it was a time of great transformation, creativity, and intellectual ferment. When Elizabeth I died in 1603, at 69, her death was met with widespread grief. She had ruled for so long, her passing marked the end of an era. She was the last of the Tudor monarchs, a dynasty that ruled England for over a century. Her legacy would endure, shaping England's destiny for generations. Elizabeth I was a complex figure, both ruthless and merciful, distant and charismatic. She defied convention, ruled in her own right, and left an indelible mark on history. She was the Virgin Queen Gloriana, good Queen Bess, a legend in her own time. Gap 5S. What if the plot against Queen Elizabeth I had succeeded? Imagine a world where the Virgin Queen never reigned, where England's golden age was cut short. The consequences would have been unimaginable, altering the course of history forever. Stay tuned to explore these possibilities. Gap 5S. Without Elizabeth's steadfast leadership, England might have succumbed to internal strife and foreign domination. The Spanish Armada, once defeated, could have triumphed. imposing Spanish rule over the island nation. The flourishing of the arts during the Elizabethan age, the works of Shakespeare and Marlowe, might never have seen the light of day. Gap 5S. The Protestant Reformation, which found a stronghold in England under Elizabeth, could have faltered, leading to a Catholic resurgence. The seeds of the British Empire, sown during Elizabeth's reign, might never have been planted. The world as we know it would be vastly different. Gap 5S. This alternative history serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of power and the pivotal role individuals play in shaping the fate of nations. Elizabeth's triumph was not just her own, but a triumph for an entire nation, setting the stage for centuries of British influence and legacy. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, was a pivotal moment in Elizabeth's reign. It was a decision born of necessity, but it came at a heavy price. It tested the Queen's resolve and strained her relationships with European powers, yet it also demonstrated Elizabeth's commitment to her realm's safety. She faced threats, both foreign and domestic, and emerged victorious. The Virgin Queen, once seen as vulnerable, had proven herself a formidable ruler.